True, that's right. My own direct exposure to the Shah was really very limited. I met him on 2 or 3 occasions with Mr. Lilienthal after the two of them had had extensive conversation on matters of mutual interest. Period. Mr. Lilienthal would frequently describe to me after these sessions the content of his coverage, and for the most part he recorded them in his journal. My own meetings with the Shah gave me very positive impressions of him. He was articulate, he was positive, he used words of reform which convinced me of his sincerity in moving in that direction. But I confess that at times he seemed a bit distracted, understandable, and that in the final session in 1977, I was a bit distressed about his physical appearance. He seemed to have aged a good deal, and he seemed to have the same physical vitality that he had had during his time. Obviously, a certain amount of time was ceremonial, but there was a recognition on his part of the nature of the work that we were doing with respect to nuclear reform, and he offered supportive comments. I recall at one time he cautioned me about being impatient with the process of change. He recognized the need to bring about acceptance of many of these changes before they could be produced. It was obvious to me that he and Lilienthal established a great deal of personal rapport, and that there was a freedom on the part of both men to speak their minds honestly. As far as my meetings with Obeid are concerned, and his period as Prime Minister, I guess the most notable was the occasion when Dr. Reining and I appeared before the entire cabinet to discuss the nature of our nuclear reform recommendation. This occurred in 1976. We were introduced by Amin Alimard, and we were given some 20 minutes to describe what we were. We had very supportive observations from the Prime Minister, Louis Ready, and a few comments from ministers with whom we had networked. In the private session with Obeid, he reiterated his own desire to achieve these changes. He commented on every occasion about his high regard for Mr. Lilienthal and his belief that Lilienthal has been a major contributor to progress in Iran. I recall that in 1976, he inquired of me as to what I thought would be the outcome of the American election, the contest between Mr. Carter and Mr. Ford. I advised him that I felt that Mr. Carter would probably win. He did not seem particularly pleased with that prospect, but we did not pursue that much further. He was candid in saying that there were some members of his cabinet, some of the ministers, who were skeptical and not particularly enthusiastic about administrative reform. I appreciated that degree of candor. It was a forewarning of possible termination of our activities, but I didn't recognize it as such at that particular time. I was distressed when I learned of his change of assignment of his regard for Mr. I went and called upon him in his office in the Major Gordon, Missy Court. And so this we continued to receive advice from him, and then before I departed, he had been arrested. And let me ask you something. You were certainly wrong, as you just said when you were arrested. Is that right? Now, when you were arrested in October, what did you think about that? I mean, what strike you? Oh, based upon my knowledge, it was incomprehensible. Why a man who had given 11 years of loyal service in a very difficult position would so suddenly be cast aside. I guess I assumed at the time there must be evidence against him of which I was not aware. And certainly there were no observations from him in any of the meetings we had that he was anything other than an enthusiastic loyalist. And he believed that he was pursuing policies set down by the imperial master. So I was puzzled, distressed. It seemed to me that this did not constitute due process. It certainly didn't constitute support for someone who had been as loyal as President. And of course I was so devastated to hear that it seemed that he had no opportunity for independence. And even as some of the loose charges were obviously deferred, there was no justification in his life. him required shoulder blame for a number of events that had taken place during that period of time, where he had no control over the outcome, because he had no supervision over the military agencies. He quoted the Shah as having told him that his primary mission was that of the economic leaders of the country, and that other parties would be taking care of such a matter. I have kept in touch with him since he came to the United States. He came in late 1978, shortly after I returned, because his wife was in serious health conditions and had to come here before me for medical treatment. She was in such distress, she called upon him to come. He came, and it was fortuitous in my judgment, because he might very well have had some treatment that needed absolute avail if he had been. We communicate occasionally in time since then. I'm also well acquainted with his brother, Hamid Musadar, whom I have known over any period of time. He and his wife have been here in Washington since they were 6. So I have an ongoing personal friendship, and I'm a great admirer of Johnson Musadar. And I must say that I have generally detected a universal admiration for him, not only among Americans, but among other national leaders with whom I have had contact in recent years. He's very highly regarded by the members of ISAF. Recently I have been at the United Nations performing consulting assignments with him, and those who have been there for any length of time recall Johnson Musadar's leadership of African Committee. He has been one of the world's outstanding Indonesians, and he produced a very affirmative impression for Iran in the work that he did internationally. I came to know Anthony, not as well, but quite well. I met him in his home, a very sumptuous home, I must say, a nice house. I've not had any communication with him since he came to the United States, but I do know his brother, who lives here, Felix Sears, as he's known as Joe, or Sai, he's supporters. So I have an easy idea. You were in touch with him, business with him when he was Minister of Finance, is that right? Minister of Finance, and then I had a couple of meetings with him when he was the president of the oil company. We discussed the possibility that consulting activity might be of some service to him as well. They didn't materialize because very shortly after that, the oil company faced a strike, and he left the country shortly thereafter. I did not have any follow-up on that. So most of the contacts were during his tenure as Minister of Finance. What sort of an administrator you find? What kind of, what if they call it an administrator? I thought he was very ambitious, that he had very broad knowledge of government, that he was a modern official who had had a very substantial amount of association with people in other countries, that he was knowledgeable economist. As administrator, I felt that he relied on others, and sometimes people who were not strong as he would like to. He articulated a policy of administrative reform, but to those who had the assignment of carrying it out, did not appear to be as effective as they might have been. Tell me if I wanted to ask you. You are, in many ways, unique in terms of negotiating, particularly in the United States, dealing with the, various levels, especially the highest level of personnel administration, being able to adjust with the process of selecting individuals for various positions, which requires greater understanding of that topic. Not only in the United States, but you've been dealing with the United Nations, with other countries, and so on. And you must have, you have come into contact, you came into contact with quite a number of Iranians who have had, who were in various positions of leadership at various levels. Could you give me an assessment how did you find them all together? I mean, how did they strike you as a group of people who were engaged in doing something? Well, like any cluster of people, they had diverse skills, they had diverse motivations. But I found all of them very loyal to the Imperial Majesty. I did not suspect any dissent on their part. I found them to be technically qualified in their field, but short on management experience, what I would call the management of the human material resources that were available to them to carry out their job. I felt that they, as a group, tended to be less supportive of decentralization than I would have felt was desired. They tended to hold too many minor decisions to their own desk. The result was that in many cases they were seriously overworked. There seemed to be a limited trust of those that were with them, even though in many cases these were individuals they had selected as who had been recommended to the job. I found most of them had been educated abroad or at the University of Tehran. I found them interested in development, but of course wanted a larger share for their own activities. A common situation was ministers in many nations. I found them more flexible than I anticipated in looking for new ideas. Part of our effort was to plant ideas so that they became their ideas, rather than those that had been conjured up by the foreign consultants. And the turnover was good. As I said earlier, there were not only changes in ministers, but changes in Osmandar, changes in deputy ministers. And I must say, I thought the manner in which the changes were made terribly abrupt. Frequently, a deputy minister would be called and told that he was to depart the following day and something was taking place. It seemed rather inhumane in light of the responsibilities that they had. The result was that a good many of the deputy ministers felt quite insecure and really didn't know where they were going. It was gratifying to me to find so many of the viewed their responsibilities as of major magnitude. They were not inclined to work together as a team, but that again tends to be the case in any democracy. But I would generally give them high marks. Certainly I would feel that they had the capacity to grow, they had the capacity to govern, and that there was a growing tendency on the part of most of them to accept not only the development objectives, but the growth objectives.
On a number of occasions, you referred to this idea of decentralization, deconcentration, delegation of power, and that sort of thing. And if I'm not mistaken, you seem to suggest that even though the idea seemed to be accepted, it seemed to be more difficult to implement.
It failed to be implemented.
Is there any particular reason in your mind as to why this was so? Why the failure of implementation?
It was too drastic a change, insofar as the history of you know the history so much better than I, but my impression is that through the years, decentralization has led to fragmentation, and that a strong Shah has had to come back and put all these pieces together and exercise control, and that there was some reluctance to give more control, more power to the Afghans, or more power to local government. But this was an adjustment that was going to take time, and so there's no reason to be impatient except that the conditions were such that if there was not a clear degree of delegation, CDB, there was going to be the generation of greater opposition. On deconcentration, we were focusing on the point that Tehran had become overly concentrated, and that there should be possibilities for moving some of the ministerial activities out of the city. We even explored the concept of an alternate capital, as in the case of Virginia. One of our consultants was a public administrator from Brazil who came and helped us to develop some consultation along that line. We were very much interested in seeing more decision-making rested at the local level and the executive level.
I hate to interrupt you because you're devoting great time to it.
Rambling a
No,
little.
no, but this thing, for example, you were talking about, this idea of something like Virginia, an alternate capital.
Oh, it's one of ours.
Was it contemplated by anyone in your own, or was it something that seemed as a possibility for suggestion?
We were encouraged to
You were encouraged to do that?
yes. And we had found that prior to our time, there had actually been royal edicts to move certain activities, such as agricultural research, out of Tehran, but never came to pass. So when people say that the Shah had absolute power, there were certain areas where the absolute nature of it did not lie, because the bureaucracy had no desire to move. There was clearly a resistance to any movement on the part of the political leadership in Tehran itself, but there were serious physical limitations upon the growth of Tehran. And the problem of water was a major issue with which we were dealing. And the forecast of the water demand with the projection of population growth was really very threatening. We even raised the question as to whether that enormous area that was going to be the model city in Tehran should be built there or should be built somewhere else. And this is going to increase the density of that particular capacity and the further concentration of government as a nation. So these were central themes that we were playing. The people in the interior, for example, were very much in accord with this. We had developed with them certain plans as to how this would proceed. But when it was discussed with the ministry, generally there were too many objections to it to have it proceed. But again, it seems to me that at some future time these issues have to be explored again. We were not trying to propose a kind of federalism that we have in the United States. That would have been inappropriate. But there could have been, particularly in the practice outside where the Shah ruled, there could have been greater degrees of delegation. We found, for example, that the change the color of taxi cabs necessitated a decision in Tehran on the part of one of the ministers. It seemed to us that this was the kind of basic decision that could be reached locally without having that degree of centralization. Well, we also thought in the educational area that there was too much centralization of power with respect to university system. And that rather than have the Ministry of Higher Education the supreme authority, that there should be greater delegation to the administrative heads of the institution. We felt that the centralization was accepted as far as the school was concerned. There should be more participation on the part of people in the design of the schools and the arrangements that were made. And after all, the population was really very diverse, and different patterns were appropriate in different places. So you'll see through all of our advice